Hey there, vinyl community and all my music loving friends. It's MGK Boston, Mike, back with another video. This time I thought I'd just feature a bunch of acquisitions that I've picked up since early January of 2021. I usually frequent two stores. One there's downtown in Comm Ave in Boston called In Your Ear, and there's another one out here in Natick called Deja Vu, where I live out in the Boston burbs. Kind of been limiting my travels due to COVID, so I just kind of hit those two stores. I've been selling a bunch of stuff to the guy down on Comm Ave at In Your Ear, and he's very fair in his pricing. I shouldn't call them acquisitions. That sounds kind of pretentious. I'm not curating an art gallery here. I'm just buying some records. So these are probably a dozen things I've picked up in the new year across a couple of genres here. So let's just walk through it. So without further ado, the great Alvin Lee and 10 Years After. I believe this is their fourth or fifth release. This was released in 1970. Cricklewood Green is the title. There's the back. It's a nice gatefold sleeve, kind of cool artwork on the inside. Band leader was Alvin Lee, the lead guitarist, lead vocalist. Of course, they were pretty well known for their performance of Going Home and a couple other tracks in their short set at the Woodstock Festival in 1969. Again, this is, I think, their fourth album. Again, released in 1970, actually the year after Woodstock. Again, I love the interior artwork on the gatefold. So some of the highlights on this, of course, 50,000 Miles Beneath My Brain. That clocks in around 7.5 minutes. That's a really nice jam. Love Like a Man was kind of a classic rock staple. Don't know these days with corporate radio if they're playing that anymore, but I remember hearing it a lot when I was a teenager on the classic rock FM format. So again, 10 Years After, Cricklewood Green, 1970 release. Oh yeah, back to 10 Years After. I'd be remiss, I had this out too. This came out a year or two later. This is called A Space and Time. Release date on this is 1973. It is a compact disc, as you can see. There's Alvin Lee down in front in the little field. You'd be familiar with I'd Love to Change the World was another classic rock radio staple on this one, but it does have a lot of other good highlights. One of These Days, Baby Won't You Let Me Rock and Roll You, and Uncle Jam finishing off as just a short instrumental. So there, Space and Time. Again, 10 Years After. Great band. Okay, this is probably one some may have heard of, some haven't. This is Babe Ruth. These guys were American. The lead singer named Jenny Han. Some critics called her kind of a cross between Janis Joplin and Robert Plant, just a screamer. Really, there she is. Of course, you can see, I hate this. People, when you buy used records, this happens. Gary Johns, I guess, owned this record at one point. Gary took the liberty of signing that. How annoying. But anyway, that's just one of my pet peeves. I'm not in the habit of writing my name on my records like a 10-year-old. But anyway, Babe Ruth, the Mexican was the big highlight on this one. Again, you've probably heard that on classic rock radio at some point if you're a classic rock fan. But yeah, this is a really good album, and there's a number of other tracks on this worthwhile. Black Dog is a really good tune. Joker, King Kong. I mean, it's really fun. And again, Jenny Han. Great singer, great singer. Babe Ruth, first base. And I should note that the album art was done by the great Roger Dean, who is really well known for doing the illustrations for all the Yes covers, and he did a couple of King Crimson album covers too. Kind of really cool artwork. Again, Babe Ruth, first base, 1972. And skipping over here to some classic country and western. The great Bobby Bare. This was released, I believe, 1965, yeah, and produced by none other than the great Chet Atkins, a great musician, guitarist in his own right, Chet Atkins was, and he produced a lot of the artists in the period on the Nashville circuit all through the 1960s. Bobby Bare was kind of in the same school as Johnny Cash, kind of heavy baritone, and his records, I wouldn't say they had themes to them, but yeah, he would tell stories throughout, and he kind of reinvented himself in the 1970s, became kind of like the outlaw scene, like what Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson were good friends of his, and in fact he shared an apartment with Waylon Jennings way back when in the late 50s when he got back from the Korean War. And there is, in fact, the opening track on this, I'm a Man of Constant Sorrow. That's a Waylon Jennings composition. And then there's a couple of Bob Dylan. Yeah, there's 2 covers on here. Blown in the Wind is on this. And Don't Think Twice, It's All Right. So again, like I said a minute ago, by the 70s he was known on the kind of the outlaw country circuit. And even the legendary concert promoter Bill Graham would have him play at the Fillmore in San Francisco, and he called him the Bruce Springsteen of country and western. So again, Bobby Bare, of course, the label back then, they would, put a little story about the artist right there, and there he is in the studio. Yeah, Bobby Bare, Constant Sorrow, really good. Shifting gears here to a little psychedelic, kind of psychedelic soul rock, if you will. This is the Electric Flag, Long Train Coming. This band was led by the great Mike Bloomfield, and the drummer was Buddy Miles. Of course, they had a horn section. They had a lot going on here. There's the band on the back. This was released, I believe, in 1968. Of course, the classic Killing Floor is the opener on this. Texas is a great tune. Another Country, Groovin' Is Easy was a cover on this. Yeah, this is really nice listen. This is. It looks more psychedelic than it actually is. It does play, like I said, again, more like it's got soul. It's soul rock, if you will. And again, led by band leader Mike Bloomfield, who was an excellent guitarist in his own right. And here's another Mike Bloomfield, of course, a compact disc. This is just a compilation of his stuff, 1964 to 69. This is a really nice collection. Born in Chicago, Going Down Slow, Got My Mojo Working, of course, Albert's Shuffle. This is really good. If you like kind of the, well, I guess you call it white blues rock, like at the school of early Eric Clapton, seek out some Mike Bloomfield. You won't be disappointed. And again, this is just another, I picked this up the same day as I got that Long Train Coming, Electric Flag. This is just a compilation of their hits, if you will. There's separate photos of the band on the back. Of course, again, Killing Floor on this, Soul Searching, Groovin' Is Easy. Is some duplication, of course, but yeah, these weren't very expensive, so I picked them both up. Best of Electric Flag. And speaking of soul, there he is right there. The godfather of soul himself, the great James Brown. This is a double live. One of his, he would do the features with his whole, the JBs were his band and dancers. He'd have, a dozen people on the stage with him. Of course, Bobby Bird here was his longtime collaborator. They met in reform school, ironically. They both committed petty crimes in the late 50s. But then they reformed, of course, and Bobby Bird's family took in James Brown for a period somewhere in rural Georgia. The name of the town doesn't really matter. But they were longtime collaborators. And Bobby Bird would sing sometimes during, he'd do solos as well, while James Brown would kick up his feet and dance all around. There's a lot of YouTube footage of James Brown. I encourage you to seek it out. There would be no funk without this guy. He invented the funk, if you will. And yeah, this is really good. I think this was a Record Store Day reissue because the date on it's 2015, and I bought it, and it was in the shrink wrap. Got this for around 20 bucks. It's well worth it. Of course, brand new, so it's mint condition. But yeah, just really fun stuff. Never Can Say Goodbye. That's my favorite song on this. It clocks in at around 8.5 minutes. And yeah, it's just really excellent. Live at the Apollo Theater, New York City, 1972. James Brown review. Moving into a little jazz right now. Walter Wanderley Trio. Walter Wanderley was actually from Sao Paulo, Brazil. He recorded several albums from the late 1950s into the early 1960s. And then by chance, Tony Bennett was actually touring Brazil back around 1964, 1963 maybe, and discovered Walter Wanderley, saw him and encouraged him to come to Los Angeles, and he actually got him signed to the Verve record label. So Wanderley came to LA and never left and died there years later. Never returned to Brazil to live. Recorded several albums on the Verve label. He was a electric keyboard player, Hammond organ. That's not for everybody. I know some hardcore jazz enthusiasts would dismiss this as kind of elevator music. I don't know. My parents listened to a lot of this Latin jazz stuff, and when I was a kid, and I always liked it. It's fun at parties. There they are. It's kind of hilarious, like a Brazilian setting with there's a bunch of coffee beans on the pallets behind the band. So it was just himself. There's Walter Wanderley down front, and then he had two percussionists. Notable absence of no bass player at all. So just percussion and the organ, and it works surprisingly. Chikanga translates to the Great Arrival, and that's the title track on this. Mar Mar is good. Amor de Nada. Here's That Rainy Day. I mean, they're all short songs. I mean, they all come in at around 2.5, 3 minutes, but it's got that Lounge Lizard feel to it, and I really like it. I have a couple more of his I bought prior to this one, but this is probably my favorite. Again, this was released in 1966. Walter Wanderley Trio, Chikanga. Sticking in the jazz style here for another minute. Of course, the Modern Jazz Quartet. They were led by pianist John Lewis, drummer Kenny Clark. On vibraphone was Milt Jackson, and of course, bass player was Ray Brown. This was recorded in 1960. European concert. Of course, it's a huge story on the gatefold on the inside. Kind of like a chamber music and classical music. These four guys just played really well together as an ensemble, a quartet, of course. But really excellent. Highlights on this one, of course, the incredible Django, Bluesology. I don't know if you can see these. Yes, I'm jumping around. Here's the track listing. But yeah, Django is probably one of their most well known. Of course, they do a version around midnight on this, which is excellent. Pyramid is good, otherwise known as Blues for Junior. It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing. That was a Duke Ellington composition that they did on this as well. This is really flawless. I encourage you, if you're new to jazz, seek this out. It's a good starting point. Really great. And it kind of bookends with this next album I'm going to show. It's also the Modern Jazz Quartet. This is their last concert. It's called, this was same lineup. As I just mentioned, this was recorded in 1974. This was the last time they did several albums between that first album I just showed, that live album, the European concert, and this one. Between those years, 1960 and 1974, when this was released, this concert. You can see the band here. Here they are. They do a great version of Summertime. I think that was a Miles Davis composition. Of course, Around Midnight's on this. Night in Tunisia's on this. That's an Art Blakey composition, if I'm not mistaken, the drummer Art Blakey. Of course, there's another version of Django on this, which is excellent. Just real pros, these guys. So these two really kind of, I guess you could say they bookend, if you will, each other. This is, of course, the early, and this is the later. Of course, after 74, they split and did side projects and all the rest of it. And they did get together, I believe, in the 80s, years later, and did a couple of shows, but all those guys, of course, passed by now. But yeah, really good. Modern Jazz Quartet. Seek it out. It's really good stuff. And still staying in the jazz vein for another moment here, the great Dave Brubeck, piano band leader. This is 1971 live at Newport. That's the Newport Jazz Festival in Rhode Island, 1971. This was a different lineup than normal. He had Jerry Mulligan on saxophone, Jack Six on bass, and Alan Dawson on drums. This is not a very long set. There's only actually 4 songs on this. As you can see there's the other guys in the quartet. There's a really excellent version of Take 5. Of course, everybody knows that song, Take 5. I'm sure, even if you're not a jazz enthusiast, you've heard Take 5 at some point in your life. And Open the Gates, Blues for Newport is really the highlight on this. It clocks in at just under 17 minutes. And kind of funny, well, not funny, side note to this, after their set at Newport in 71, an actual riot broke out, if you will, because the Allman Brothers Band, of all people, were invited to this festival, which is an all jazz festival, and I'm a huge Allman Brothers fan, but I don't know what the promoters were thinking. And a lot of people showed up without tickets, so kind of echoed Woodstock, where people came, knocked down the fences, and wrecked a bunch of stuff. And as a result, the Newport Jazz Festival moved to New York City after that for several years before returning back to Rhode Island again for the summer festival that just down the road from me here, about an hour from where I live, is Newport, Rhode Island. So again, this is a really solid set. I'm a big Dave Brubeck fan in his many incarnations. He did released a lot of material in his lifetime, and I've got quite a bit of it. This is my only complaint is this is short. Again, it's only 4 songs. Not even 4, because the introduction is 40 seconds, so that doesn't really count. So it's essentially 3 songs for a total of around 35-40 minute runtime. But yeah, this is good. If you ever run into this, seek it out. It's the last set at Newport right there. There's Dave Brubeck. Excellent. One of my favorites. Great piano player. All right, and shifting gears into a little, I would call this blues rock, straight up more blues, authentic rock and roll. The great George Thorogood. This was released in 1978. This is his second release. At the time, when he was submitting demo tapes for his first album before this one, the label, they didn't quite know what to think of the studio stuff. He translates better live because he's a bit of a phenom in that he could play country and western, he could play slide, traditional rock and roll. You got a Chuck Berry flair to him with his stage presence. Just really wild, man. Here he is with the band down here. Always played with the same guys. Jeff Simon on drums, Billy Blau on bass, and Meat Pennington on tambourine and maracas. There's a couple of personnel right there. And there's, of course, George up there. Yeah, this one is all covers. This is his second album. It's called Moving On Over. Of course, the title track, that's a Hank Williams composition. Hank Williams Sr., of course. Who Do You Love's on this. The Sky Is Crying, Cocaine Blues, that's a Johnny Cash song. New Hawaiian Boogie's an excellent instrumental. I saw him live several years after this. Of course, this is 1978. I saw him in 85. And that was a Bad to the Bone tour. He was really getting popular at that point. I saw him in Ottawa. It was an outdoor in the summertime, and it was kind of funny. Johnny Winter opened up for that one, actually, a real sizzling blues night. And during the Johnny Winter set, one over enthusiastic concert goer jumped the stage, and it was raining a bit, and the guy slid his ass across the stage. It was really funny. But then the rain stopped eventually. I remember that night, and George took the stage and just blew everybody away. Sadly, I've never seen him again. I've been kind of making a COVID wish list of when live music happens again, because he still tours. He's in his mid to late 60s easily now, but still playing with the same lineup. And just go YouTube and look up some of his stuff. I mean, he loves to play. He interacts with the audience. He's just a great player and fun, just a fun guy to watch. Great musician. Anyway, George Thorogood. Got a bunch of his stuff in my collection. No point in showing it all, but that one was one. I didn't have it on a record. I only had it on a compact disc, and it's probably my favorite album of his. And the fact that it's all covers, traditional rock and roll, and he makes it his own is, again, as I've said before, it's kind of a true art form that somebody can do a cover, somebody else's composition, and reinvent it and make it sound new again. And on that record, Moving On Over, George Thorogood does just that. So back to some jazz. The great pianist Keith Jarrett. This is actually with his quintet. Of course, some of the bigger names on here. You'd know Charlie Hayden on bass. I'm not familiar with these other guys. Dewey Redman on saxophone, Paul Motion on drums, Guilherme Franco on percussion, additional percussion. Clocks in at probably about 40-45 minutes runtime. It's only 4 songs, but in typical Keith Jarrett fashion, they're progressive and it's never boring. This is really good. This came out the year after he did his famous Double Live in Cologne, Germany album. It's called Shades. I like the cover art. Yeah. So anyway, Keith Jarrett, Shades. If you do like progressive, kind of far out jazz, look for some Keith Jarrett, especially and if you like piano. Yeah, he's just a relaxed style, but he takes it in all kinds of different directions and keeps it interesting, of course, in a non-traditional way. So the great Keith Jarrett, 1975, Shades. And as I was speaking earlier about great guitarists, the great George Thorogood, of course, the Irishman, may he rest in peace, the great Rory Gallagher. This is Calling Card, probably his best known studio album. There he is on the back as well. Just a master of the Stratocaster, just an incredible player. Blues, predominantly blues, of course, with a rock and roll tinge to it. This came out again in 1976, and he'd released several albums up to this point. I believe probably 6, maybe 7 albums at this point. Some of the highlights on this: Moonchild, Country Mile, Secret Agent's excellent. Got a little radio play Secret Agent did at the time, but never really made it. I won't say made it, but he only toured the United States a couple of times. Predominantly toured Europe and points around the continent. Never really drew a huge crowd over here in North America and Canada, the United States, but not because he didn't deserve it. He was an excellent player. Died unfortunately young. Surgery, in some kind of a routine surgery that didn't go right, of course, and died on the operating table. I believe in the mid to late 80s he passed. But yeah, this is Calling Card, Rory Gallagher. Any of his stuff is good. I mean, if you see it, grab it. It's good. I've got a bunch of stuff on compact disc, and I've been buying, duplicating some of that on record. This is a French import. It's a double. There he is, a bunch of pictures of him. Great Rory Gallagher in the gatefold here. This is a double. As you can see, it's in French. Two discs. Again, this is a 2-record set rather, and this is really nice. It's because it's just got a lot of, I won't say they're his hits, but well-known stuff. Eat My Words, Can't Believe It's True, Wave Myself Goodbye. Bullfrog Blues is really good. Bullfrog Blues, look that up on YouTube. There's a couple of live versions of it, and you can see what I mean when I say he's a master of the Stratocaster. There he is wailing on it right there. Just a really excellent guitarist. Yeah, the Irishman, Rory Gallagher. So seek some of that out. You won't be disappointed. If you like guitar and you like blues, that's yeah, again, you can't go wrong. And rounded things out today with a little classic, more some, I guess you'd call it not acid rock, blues rock. This is Cactus. This was a super group formed by Carmen Appice, the drummer, and Tim Bogert, bass player. They both were well established already in Vanilla Fudge. You could seek out some of the Vanilla Fudge stuff. I'm not going to talk about that today, but I'm sure you've heard of them. Of course, they formed this band after Vanilla Fudge disbanded. Lead vocals was a guy named Rusty Day. He'd been in the Asbury Dukes with Ted Nugent, and was a singer with that band, Asbury Dukes. So this is their debut. This is self-titled Cactus. There's the band right there. 1970s fashion, right? Anyway, Parchment Farm opens this up. The highlight for me on this is a track called Oleo. That's a really, really rockin' jam. Feels so good. You can't judge a book by the cover. I mean, this is really excellent. Not really well known. Of course, they're an American outfit. They did have some traction at the time, but they only did this album and I believe 2 others, and then they disbanded. This is their best. The other 2 are not that good. That's why I saw the other 2 actually at In Your Ear back in February, and I settled on this one. Actually, I got this one last weekend just locally here in Natick for a few bucks, and it's in great condition and it rocks. It's solid. Cactus. Oleo again. Seek out that track, O-L-E-O it's spelled. Look it up on YouTube. A couple of good live versions of it on there, and yeah, you'll dig it. Okay, dig the rock. All right, so that's it for another Saturday, folks. I did buy more than 12 records the past few months. I've also sold a whole bunch of stuff. So with every time I purge some stuff, I bring in more stuff. So, but it's good. I got to keep it balanced that way. I can't be a hoarder. Kind of a rule of thumb, I set stuff aside as I'm going through my my vault, as I call it, and stuff that I don't listen to. I kind of have a pile that's ready to sell, and when it reaches 40 or 50, then I'll take them in and do a trade for credit, which I enjoy doing. And again, if you're ever in the Boston area, I do recommend In Your Ear Records down on Commonwealth Avenue by BU. Yeah, you won't be disappointed. The owner there, Reed's a nice guy, and yeah, fair credit. And if you're a tourist again, when COVID's over, I'll take you there. I'll take you to In Your Ear and we'll do some shopping. So again, folks, I hope everybody's staying safe and watching out for this COVID. The vaccines are rolling out here in Massachusetts, and there's some light at the end of the tunnel, so I hope it's the same for everybody else watching this video. Light at the end of the tunnel, that is, and carry on, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.